Hello and welcome. It is February 20th, 2026, and what I am about to share with you challenges the very foundation of optical physics. Less than 12 hours ago, the James Webb Space Telescope did not just send back an image. It sent back a warning. I'm talking about 3-point eye atlas. For months, we have tracked this object. We thought we knew its trajectory. We thought we understood its composition. But at 4 o'clock UTC this morning, the sunlight reflecting off 3-eye atlas did something that, statistically speaking, is impossible for a natural object. The electromagnetic waves of the sunlight didn't just scatter, they didn't just reflect, they shifted orientation by exactly 90 degrees. Pause and think about what that means. In nature, light scatters randomly. When sunlight hits a comet, it diffuses as chaotic. But the light coming from 3-eyed atlas right now is perfectly polarized. It is coherent, it is organized. Imagine throwing a bucket of water against a wall, and instead of splashing, every single drop lines up in a perfect vertical row. That is the level of order we are seeing. NASA's polarimetry data shows a Stokes parameter spike that is 400 times higher than any comet in recorded history. This isn't ice, this isn't dust. This is the optical signature of a manufactured surface. The probability of a chaotic, tumbling rock producing a perfect 90-degree polarization shift is calculated at 1 in 8.4 billion. Those are not odds I am willing to bet on. This is not a random event. This is a specific physical interaction happening 240 million kilometers from Earth, and it suggests that 3-eye atlas is not just reflecting sunlight, it is manipulating it. Let that sink in. We're looking at an object that interacts with light in a way that usually requires high-grade laboratory equipment. And the question that keeps astrophysicists awake tonight is simple. Why? Why would an object need to filter sunlight with such mathematical precision? The answer, I believe, changes everything we know about our place in the universe. To understand why this data is causing emergency briefings at the highest levels of astrophysics, we first need to understand what polarization actually is. Think of it like a pair of high-quality sunglasses. Sunlight usually vibrates in every direction, up, down, left, right. It is chaotic. It is messy. When you put on polarized lenses, you block out the chaotic waves and only let the vertical waves through. That is how you cut the glare on a lake. You are filtering the chaos into order. In space, comets are like the lake. They are dusty, dirty snowballs. They scatter light in every direction. They create chaos. They do not create order. But the data we received at 1842 UTC yesterday from 3-eye atlas tells a very different story. When the sunlight hit the surface of this object, it didn't scatter. It aligned. The light waves were forced into a single, unified plane. And here is where the physics gets truly uncomfortable. The degree of linear polarization for a standard comet like Halley or Neowise is typically between 1% and 3%, maybe 5% if the dust is particularly fine. The polarization reading from 3-eyed atlas is 87.6%. Let me put this in perspective. That is not a dusty rock. That is a mirror. That is a surface so smooth, so structurally consistent, that it organizes photons with near-perfect efficiency. When I first saw these numbers, I had to verify them twice. I assumed it was a sensor glitch, a calibration error in the deep space network. But the numbers don't lie. And more importantly, the numbers are not coming from just one telescope. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, using its NIRCam instrument, detected this 87.6% polarization spike at a wavelength of 2.5 microns. At the exact same moment, ESA's Euclid mission, millions of kilometers away, recorded an identical polarization signature using its VIS instrument, and to be absolutely certain, the Very Large Telescope in the Atacama Desert of Chile cross-referenced the optical data. 3 independent sources, different methodologies, 1 impossible conclusion. This is what we call a Six Sigma event. The statistical probability of 3 different observatories malfunctioning in the exact same way at the exact same second to produce the exact same erroneous data is virtually 0. We have to accept the reality of what is in front of us. The surface of 3i Atlas is not behaving like rock or ice. It is behaving like a crystalline lattice or a polished metallic membrane. And then, just 3 hours after that initial detection, the polarization angle shifted. It didn't drift slowly as you would expect from a tumbling object. It snapped. The orientation of the light waves rotated exactly 90 degrees from vertical to horizontal in less than 40 seconds. Pause and realize what this means. For a natural object to change the polarization angle of reflected light by 90 degrees, it would have to physically rotate its entire body by 90 degrees. But our radar data shows 3i Atlas did not rotate. Its physical axis remained fixed. So what changed? The only way, and I mean the only way, to achieve a 90-degree polarization flip without rotating the object itself is if the surface manipulated the light. This suggests an active material response, a metamaterial, something that can change its refractive index or its optical properties on command. We're not just talking about reflecting sunlight anymore. We are talking about controlling it. And if this object can control light, then it can do things that violate every known principle of cometary physics. Now, here is what makes this fascinating from a theoretical standpoint. To understand the gravity of this 90-degree shift, we have to look at the physics of materials. In nature, we have materials that can rotate the polarization of light. We call this birefringence, or optical activity. Quartz crystals can do it. Certain sugar solutions can do it. But these materials are passive. They sit there. They do not change their properties in real time. A piece of quartz does not suddenly decide to rotate light 90 degrees 1 minute and then stop the next. The data from 3i Atlas shows a dynamic, active shift. Think of it this way. Imagine you are holding a smartphone. The screen uses liquid crystals to control light. When you rotate the phone, the polarization aligns with your eyes, but the phone itself doesn't change its internal chemistry. It uses electricity to align the molecules. It requires energy. It requires a power source. The 90-degree flip we witnessed at 4 o'clock UTC suggests that the surface of 3i Atlas is electrically active. The physics here is intriguing because comets are inert. They are dead. They do not have power grids. They do not have circuitry. Yet the sunlight reflecting off this object behaved exactly as if it were bouncing off a giant switchable mirror. When you examine the data from the Hubble Space Telescope polarizers, the shift happened across the entire visible spectrum simultaneously. Blue light, red light, infrared light, all rotated in perfect unison. This is critical. In natural physics, different wavelengths usually scatter differently. Blue scatters more than red. That is why the sky is blue. But 3i Atlas rotated the polarization of every wavelength by exactly 90 degrees at the same time. That is what we call achromatic modulation. To achieve that, naturally, you would need a dust cloud with particles perfectly sized, perfectly aligned, and perfectly spaced, spanning kilometers of space. The probability of that formation occurring by chance in the interstellar void is effectively 0. So if it's not natural, what are we looking at? There is a concept in advanced propulsion physics known as photon recycling. If you are light sail, a spacecraft pushed by light, you want to extract every ounce of momentum from the photons hitting you. By manipulating polarization, you can control how light reflects, potentially steering the craft without using fuel. Is 3i Atlas steering itself? The data implies a level of control that rivals our most advanced active optics labs. But there is another possibility, one that is perhaps even more unsettling. Polarization is not just for propulsion, it is for information. On Earth, we use polarization multiplexing in fiber optic cables to double the amount of data we can send. We send one signal vertically and another horizontally. It allows us to pack information into light. When 3i Atlas flipped its polarization axis by 90 degrees, was it just a physical reaction? Or was it a signal? Was it changing the channel? The modulation we saw yesterday was distinct. It was binary, 0 degrees, then 90 degrees, vertical, then horizontal. It looks less like a random tumbling rock and more like a deliberate sequence, a shutter opening and closing. And the timing is what really concerns the scientific community. This shift occurred exactly as 3i Atlas entered the optimal observational window for Earth's southern hemisphere telescopes. It happened when we were watching most closely. Whatever this object is, it is interacting with the solar spectrum in a way that suggests it knows it is being illuminated. It is taking the chaotic energy of the sun and organizing it. And in physics, the decrease of entropy, the creation of order from chaos, is the definitive hallmark of intelligence. We are looking at a localized reduction of entropy. We are looking at structure where there should be none. Everything I've shown you, the 87.6% polarization, the simultaneous spectral shift, the cross-validation from 3 separate observatories, all of that was documented by 400 UTC this morning. But we are not done, because at 5:15 UTC, something else happened. The Hubble Space Telescope, which had been tracking the polarization angle, suddenly lost its lock. The data stream flatlined for 12 seconds, and when it came back online, the polarization wasn't just sitting at 90 degrees, and it was oscillating. Picture this. Instead of a steady stream of polarized light, 3i Atlas began to pulse. Every 2.3 seconds, the polarization angle would rotate from 0 degrees to 90 degrees and back again, up, down, with the rhythmic precision of a heartbeat. This was not random tumbling. This was a modulation frequency. A natural object tumbling through space, even a weirdly shaped asteroid, would produce a smooth sine wave curve. It would gradually brighten and dim as it turned. The data from 3i Atlas showed a square wave, an on-off switch. The polarization would snap to 90 degrees, hold for exactly 1.1 seconds, snap back to 0 degrees, hold for 1.1 seconds, over and over again. When you see a square wave in nature, you question your instruments. When you see it coming from a specific point in the sky, validated by multiple independent radio telescopes on Earth, you question your reality. Square waves do not exist in orbital mechanics. They exist in electronics. They exist in communication. If this is a natural phenomenon, then we have discovered a new state of matter that can switch its optical properties thousands of times faster than anything we have ever seen in a laboratory. If this is artificial, then 3i Atlas is not just reflecting sunlight, it is modulating it to encode information. We are looking at a potential carrier wave. The sheer energy required to modulate the polarization of an entire object's reflected light surface across kilometers of surface area is staggering. We are talking about gigawatts of power. To do this naturally, impossible to do this artificially. It implies technology far beyond our current capabilities. And within 20 minutes of this pulsing beginning, the world's major radio telescopes, the VLA in New Mexico, the FAST telescope in China, the Meerkat array in South Africa, all swiveled to track 3I Atlas. Why? Because when an object starts pulsing light with mathematical precision, you stop asking what it is and you start asking who is controlling it. This is the data that prompted the emergency closed-door session at the International Astronomical Union less than an hour ago. The scientific community is not just puzzled, they are alarmed, because the square wave is not a geological feature. It is a signature. Let's establish what we know with absolute certainty. The polarization of light from 3I Atlas shifted 90 degrees in under 40 seconds. Minus 3 independent observatories, JWST, Euclid, and the VLT, confirmed a polarization purity of 87.6%. The signal transitioned from a steady state to a precise binary square wave pulse at 5:15 UTC. Minus spectral shift was achromatic, affecting all wavelengths simultaneously. These are not theories. These are documented observations. But one question remains unanswered. One question that the scientific consensus carefully avoids. What is causing the coherence? Because the answer determines everything. If this is a natural phenomenon, then we are witnessing a new form of matter, a macroscopic quantum state that defies thermodynamics. If this is artificial, then we are looking at technology capable of manipulating light on a planetary scale. And if it is the latter, then the pulse is not just a reflection, it is a transmission. And the clock is running right now. As you watch this, every major radio telescope on Earth is pointed at that specific coordinate in the sky. The data stream is active, the algorithms are decoding. In less than 48 hours, 3I Atlas will pass through its perihelion point, its closest approach to the Sun. The intensity of the sunlight hitting its surface will double if the polarization holds. If the square wave continues, then we are no longer observing nature, we are observing intention. T minus 36 hours. The instruments are recording, and whatever 3I Atlas is, we're about to find out.